Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of Live at Drew's House. Hope you're all doing okay. We do this show today on the heels of a bit of a historic moment here in the country's history. Three guilty verdicts have come back in the trial of Derek Chauvin, former police officer in Minneapolis, Derek Chauvin, which somebody we've talked so much about, charged and now convicted in the killing of George Floyd. He'll have sentencing about 2 months from now, looking at least, up to 40 years in prison, probably at least. Well, we'll see what they end up doing. But that'll come down in a couple months. But obviously, a historic day in the country. There were celebrations. There was relief on the streets. There was places preparing for protests, shops being boarded up from Boston to Minneapolis to coast. And I don't know, it felt weird to let this pass by without doing a little special edition show on it. We have been following this story, obviously, from when it happened to the protest in the summertime to now. And obviously, this isn't going to close a chapter on this. The policing issues in this country are a real thing, specifically towards people of color, specifically towards Black people in particular. And I'm going to bring in a guest right now to talk a little bit about this. I feel like it was going to be weird to go the day without talking about it, so a special edition show coming at you today. I'm going to be joined by Imari Paris Jeffries, Executive Director of King Boston, a nonprofit dedicated to addressing racial and economic inequalities. This should be interesting, so we'll bring Imari in right now. All right, so Imari Paris Jeffries joining us. Thank you so much for doing this, man. I appreciate it on obviously what has been a very busy day, a historic day for the country.
Yes.
Well, first of all, we're just hours removed here from 3 guilty verdicts against Derek Chauvin. Your initial reaction to that?
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind of a day. I think a lot of us were, anxious, full of, trepidation, not knowing honestly which way that this would go. And so, I'm feeling a sense of utter relief, and still with a headache, still feeling like not satisfied. It's there's accountability happened with the conviction, but we know that justice isn't fully sought out. And so I think that's the sense of relief I'm feeling. And we just saw this trial where Derek Chauvin was on trial, but we also saw substance use disorder on trial. We saw poverty on trial. We saw young people experiencing trauma on trial. We saw racist tropes on trial. And so the verdict of seeing the guilty, right, to seeing that this is no longer acceptable and that we're moving to a place post-vaccine where we can expect justice is a good feeling, but it's not one that I think we can depend on it. We need continued examples of success in order for this to sit easy with me as well as other folks.
I noticed so many people saying the same thing, pushing back on that word justice, because it really, it's a overall positive day, but it's not justice. If justice was done, George Floyd would still be alive, and all these other incidents, we're a long way from full justice. And I'm feeling a lot of people pushing back on that.
Yeah, because in the backdrop of the trial, we saw Dante Wright killed, we saw Adam Toledo killed, we saw the video of Second Lieutenant Karen Nazaro being pepper sprayed during a stop. And so this was in the background, in the backdrop of the trial. We saw this rise in Asian hatred, transphobia laws, voter suppression laws, all going on in the midst of a trial. So, when people talk about one step forward, 2 steps back, this feels like that in action. So yes, there was accountability. Yes, there was a verdict, a guilty verdict, which we want to see. But it's this strange feeling again of 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back occurring. These other cases are still still in the air, and we still have yet to see what will happen to the other officers. And so I think that's the next step of the trial and what we can expect in the next few months or so.
And that being said, when you heard those three guilties, because you told me you weren't convinced that that was going to come down that way, what was that reaction though? Was it a deep breath? Was it a sigh of relief? What was it?
It felt like someone had released air out of the tires. Like this incredible weight on my shoulders had been lifted. In the past couple of weeks, myself, King Boston, and other activists, other philanthropic leaders, we created maybe a few months ago the Forward Fund. And so we were in and continue to be in the process of making these small grassroots grants to organizations who are directly working with communities experiencing trauma. And I think either way you slice this, this was a traumatic experience for a lot of people, and it still is. I think it's not over in the hearts and minds of many of us.
When you look back over the last year, it has not been an easy year, obviously. Throw a pandemic that hopefully we never experience again as the other backdrop into the mix. But when you look back to last summer and right here in Boston, right where you are in Hyde Park joining us tonight, you think back to the people marching on the streets and kind of a whole new generation of people being woken up to the policing issues and issues of inequality. What comes to mind when you think back over the last year?
Yeah, I think to contextualize it, we're in the midst of this country's third Reconstruction. The other two happening right after the Civil War, the second Reconstruction happening when returning GIs came back from World War II, all the way up to the Civil Rights Movement. And so this is a part of this third Reconstruction, which is an emergence of elected and civic leaders, a different conversation and policies around economic justice, and then a tear in the social fabric. And so I think the emergence of Ayanna Pressley, Congresswoman Pressley, as a national figure, our new mayor, our city council, our top law enforcement officials in Boston, our attorney general, as a part of this third Reconstruction, where we're seeing diverse leaders in positions of power. And I hope that the policies and the social disruptions that should occur during a Reconstruction have an opportunity to manifest itself.
All right, and as you may have seen the dog in the background there, Imari was just joking. He saw him as he was talking. The dog Mookie has a cone on these days, so issue with the face, but he's doing all right. He's going to be fine. But he always makes an appearance on the show. It's very funny. But back to the order of business. So what do you hope to see going forward? Obviously, the protests are not going to stop. Like you said, there's too many other things happening, just never mind just in Minneapolis, I mean all around the country. But what going forward, what do you hope to see?
Well, when we were making joke of this, like the dog in the background, right?
Yeah.
24 months ago, that would have been outrageous. A dog or a kid in the background, or a family member walking in the back of a video, it would have been outrageous. And now it's so not a big deal. Actually, it's so normalized. It's like, oh, there's a dog in the background. I think this moment where we've had to stay home during the pandemic has allowed us to realize and take stock on what's really important and what's really necessary and what serves us and what no longer serves us. And I think these are the things that I hope we take forward with us post-pandemic. Does not being connected to each other serve us? Does these systems of inequity and racism, do they serve us? Do we really want these systems? It's a house fire. The wall is burnt down. There's on the wall that's burnt down, there's one outlet. Are we going to build the wall back with one outlet? Or are we going to put microfibers and all the electricity and all the funds and gadgets back into the new wall we're building? And I think that's what this moment is. We have an opportunity to build a new house, and we don't have to build it in the old way anymore. And so let's not, and let's take stock on what's important to us, like being together, like our connectivity, like our ability to show empathy for other people. This idea that all lives matter, this idea that we can't show empathy for one group without it diminishing us is problematic. And so there's got to be an empathy campaign for all of us to be able to have empathy for our fellow human beings, to take up for their causes without it having to directly impact us in order for us to care. And I think that's part of the new normal that we want to bring with us post-pandemic.
Why do you think that's been such a tough thing for people to get their heads around? I don't know if it's generational. I don't know if it's from community to community, but it's like you either have to pick Black Lives Matter or you're on the side of police. It's like, it seems like there's these lines that have been drawn. You either wave a thin blue line in front of your house, or you wave a Black Lives Matter flag, and it's one or the other. What, I mean, I'm sure that's problematic for you.
Yeah, and I think the way that issues have become politicized, that that it becomes more about winning an issue instead of really interrogating if that is something that that we need to move forward. Do we want to all live in safe communities? Absolutely. Do we want to have a structure where if something goes wrong, we call somebody that comes and helps and problem solves? Yes, we do. But the one that we have, the structure that we have, the system that we have is not working. 1/3 of pretextual stops involving Black folks end up in a shooting. If 1/3 of the time your TV didn't turn on, or 1/3 of the time your computer didn't work, or 1/3 of the time your car didn't work, or 1/3 of the time you decide to show up to work, I mean, all these things wouldn't be acceptable if 1/3 of the time things didn't happen in the way we would want it to change. And I think we have to ask and answer these questions. Like, is it working for all of us? And if not, what's a way that it can work? And engage in a conversation to figure that out.
I heard Al Sharpton was just on the doing a press conference after the the verdict was read, and it was it did jump out to me. He was doing kind of a look back over the last year, and it jumped out at me that he thanked all the young people who were hitting the streets all across the country.
Yes.
And I know I saw a lot of that firsthand in Boston. I saw a lot of people who you could tell it was their first protest. It was their first time they had been opened up to something like that. I covered it, and I was right in a few of them. I wonder what that was like for you, seeing all those young faces kind of get involved in this and probably bring those conversations back home to their own dinner tables and have real conversations. What that feeling is like.
I think it's one. Change has always been led by younger people, right? And the older we get, the more conservative we get, and we forget and we suffer from adultism, right? Because this adultism has young Black girls looking like women and young Black boys looking like grown men and monsters, right? And so this adultism that we're all a part of in the different ways that it impacts Black and Latinx young people and youth. So, many of the social problems that we're experiencing today, young people are going to be the direct negative beneficiaries of this, right? The environment, the housing crisis, student loan debt, the economy. These are the negative consequences that our older generations have left for younger people, right? And so they're also in a situation where they're better connected to us than when I was their age. I'm 48 years old, right? And it was a phone. And if you went out, you're supposed to, I guess, call and check in, and no one knew where you are. I mean, this generation is better connected, more networked, has access to more knowledge than we ever had. And so it's only natural that their awareness for the issues, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, the type of workplaces that they want to live at. Like, these are seeds, these are many seeds that have been planted by generations that have been older to them. And I think they've absorbed it. They've taken it to the next level, and they were out in the streets using their bodies to demand change. And I think we have a lot to be thankful for millennials and Generation Zers.
And let me just ask you too, because you've done a lot of great work. And again, we're joined by Imari Paris Jeffries, Executive Director of King Boston, the nonprofit dedicating to addressing racial and economic inequalities. I wonder, pandemic-wise, how have things been for, you're in Hyde Park, you said, your
Yes.
community? Are people, I mean, is there a real effort to get vaccinated? Is there enough options to get vaccinated? How is this going? Because it does differ. It differs from my community here in Danvers to Beverly next door. It's kind of this mad rush for vaccines. How are people doing in this pandemic?
You know, in my neighborhood, I see people getting vaccinated. There's a vaccine clinic less than a mile away from my house at one of the local community centers, and the new Roxbury Community College Center has opened up a lot of opportunities, and I think especially today there's been an increased amount of access at Heinz Convention Center and at Boston's Cathedral, Fenway Park. And so I've seen people, my friends, people in my community, attempt to get vaccinated, try to have access in our communities. I think it was a rough start for some communities of color with vaccination attempts, but I think it's been a concerted effort there. I think the thing that's been the saddest to see is the sheltering of stores run by people of color in my neighborhood. Black and Latinx businesses were and are the hardest hit during the pandemic, not having the resources that some other small businesses have. And so, we're seeing a sheltering of those businesses in my neighborhood and across many communities of color in Boston. And so I think when we think about this infrastructure build and the recovery, I hope that we are also unapologetically thinking about all of our small businesses. They are the lifelines of community. When people talk about moving to a neighborhood, they're really talking about their small business ecosystem, where they can walk to their laundromat, their coffee shop, their pizza spots, whatever eateries that they go to. Like, these are what make a community vibrant. And I think it's important that, in all of our communities, these small business owners have what they need to sustain.
And I think your fear is probably what mine is too. Just the numbers say that some of those will not be able to come back, and
That's right.
It's very sad. All right, let's bring it back here. Final minute or two. Just back to today. Just kind of wrap up the. And again, we're just doing this interview just hours after this verdict, couple hours after the Derek Chauvin verdict. Probably still hasn't completely sunk in, or maybe you were able to process it because there is so much work left to do. But where's your head at right now as you look back on the events of today and the events of the last year?
I'm thinking about ensuring that some of the organizations that we're partnering with have the resources that they need. I'm thinking about the next trial. What's going to happen in Minneapolis, what's going to happen in Chicago. I'm thinking about what's happening here in the Commonwealth, and how we'll respond to the changes. I think the Commonwealth has an opportunity to be first in the nation, be the city on the hill that we imagine ourselves to be this bastion of hope. We're close to the water, close to mountains. We're a life sciences mecca, higher education ecosystem in the whole state is tremendous. If any state has the willpower, if any state punches above its weight class, it's our state. And so I feel overall optimistic that our state, our region, Boston, will lead the nation around in the next era of inclusion and racial equity.
What would you tell the high school kid that's looking to do something, that really wants to tangibly do something to help a lot of these issues, to help solve a lot of these problems, and feels like they just don't know where to start? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I think the way that racism works, it has you thinking that the only way to help is to do something outside of yourself, right? Helping is something physical that you engage with other people. But in the way that racism works, racism is a system, and racism is a socialization form, right? We are socialized into racism. It's like, I talk about my plant-based journey. Despite the fact that I want to be and stay plant-based, everywhere around me, from parties to company outings to restaurants, most of the options are meat-based, and so it's hard to stay plant-based when there's so meat-based options, right? So it's hard to stay woke when there's more things trying to get you back to sleep. And so I would tell a young person, it's okay to work on themselves. It's okay to interrogate everything around you through reading, through conversations with your friends and loved ones, through what we are consuming, through music and media. It's okay to start there. because we have to start with ourselves. Again, the airlines, their safety briefing is one of the things that they get right. Put on your own air mask before assisting others. And so that's a twist in the new normal. You got to start with ourselves before we assist others. And so that's what I would recommend.
Good stuff. Imari Paris Jeffries, thank you so much for taking some time, man. I know it's a busy one for you. It was a lot going on here today, and I appreciate you taking some time for us. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Great seeing you.